thank you for joining me. And this website is all about helping you to really feel confident, to feel prepared for your interview, so that when you do finally get to that point where your interview is due, you're ready to go, you feel at your best, and your mind is clear and ready to go for your interview. Now, I spent over a decade in recruitment, and then I went on to hiring people for my own team. And I mainly focused on roles for marketing, sales, and growth roles for a mixture of different types of companies, from NGOs to investment banks to law firms, you name it. I've recruited for a number of different roles for a number of different people. And part of that involved coaching and mentoring people during the hiring process, and especially during the interview process. And I've helped hundreds of people to get the roles that they want. And one thing that I've noticed throughout the whole process, there's a common denominator in who is successful and who is not. And that common denominator is really confidence and mindset. And today I just wanted to go through a few things that I would suggest that you do in order to get your confidence to the level it should be, because you need to walk in there feeling confident so that the person sitting in front of you can also have confidence in you, in your ability to do the job, and your likelihood of actually, I suppose, getting involved in the business and understanding the business and being part of the business. So 7 things for you. So one of the first things I'd always recommend that you do is remind yourself of what you have achieved. Whether great or small, it's always good to go through your CV and pick out your achievements, pick out outcomes for each role that you've done, whether it be, increasing the subscriber base during your role as a digital marketing manager, or securing $1 million deals in sales. Whatever that may be, it's important that you go through your CV and understand what you've achieved for each role, what outcomes you've achieved, how you've benefited each company that you've worked for, because that's what the interviewer wants to hear. And that will give you a boost of confidence, knowing that you've really made a good contribution and a positive contribution in the roles that you've worked in. So that's number 1. Number 2, what do other people say about you? What do your colleagues, what do your trusted friends say about you? Because it's all well and good, talking about what you've achieved, but what do they say about you from a point of view of what you've contributed, not just to the team, but to the role, to the business? Speak to them, speak to your colleagues, speak to your trusted friends. Get them to write testimonials if that's possible as well. And do that before your interview. You should be doing that as you go along, really, so that you can build up a pool of case studies, a pool of testimonials that you can then call upon and really refer to and review when the interview comes along, and that you can use those testimonials to really, consolidate what you've said about your achievements. So that's number 2. Know your value as well. So by that I mean, what are your strengths? What can you bring in terms of your strengths to the business that you're going to an interview for? What can you bring in terms of, again, the skills that you have? What can you bring in terms of, what, your passion for that particular business? Are you aligned with the actual mission of the business, and have you had experience of, growing a similar business? Have you had experience of really achieving great things in your current role? So it's really important to know what your value is and what you can do to contribute to a prospective business, to a prospective employer, and communicate that during your interview. So it's about knowing your strengths. Focus on the things that you're really good at, as opposed to really contemplating and lamenting on the things that you perceive as being not so good. That's number 3. Another thing to think about, number 4 in this, in terms of your own confidence, is to understand that the interviewer is probably just as nervous as you, because many times people who do interviews don't really have that much experience of doing interviews. So they're thinking to themselves, what kind of questions do I need to ask? I hope everything's going to go right. Have I arranged the room correctly? I remember myself when I just started interviewing that I was quite nervous. I mean, obviously I interviewed hundreds and possibly thousands of people in my time in recruitment and hiring, but I think it's important to understand that if you're going to a role within a business, the designated interviewer probably doesn't have much experience themselves. So it's not as if they're any more experienced than you are in terms of the whole interview process. So bear that in mind, and that should give you some peace of mind, I'd hope. Another thing I'd advise you to do is get a coach or get a mentor, because they can help you to really pick out the things that are important for your interview, your achievements, the alignment in terms of values, what to expect. They can give you a mock interview. I mean, for example, I'm an interview coach for marketers, for growth professionals, and I often assess people's interviews. So, when they come to an interview with me, or when I do a mock interview with them, they're often not the most confident because they don't really know where they're going wrong. So having a coach can help you to point out the things that you need to improve and make you feel confident that you've ironed those things out before the interview. So another thing on my list is speak to people who are optimistic. So I know I've got friends who are perhaps on the side of being pessimistic, and those who are more optimistic. So what I tend to do, or what I tended to do when I was interviewing or had interviews myself, I would speak to the optimistic people more so to get their opinions, to get their views, to get their tips and advice, because pessimistic people perhaps will not put you in the right frame of mind. So always speak to pessimistic people as much as possible. And number 7 on my list, and probably the most important thing, which kind of summarizes all of this, is make sure you're prepared for your interview. Like I said before, mock interviews are a really good thing to do. But with mock interviews, you can practice interview questions, typical interview questions that come up, how to answer them. A coach can give you the feedback that you need to make sure that you're doing what you should be doing. You can practice how to ask interview questions because that is also very important as well. So prepare by understanding the business, what their values are, what their mission is, understand the people within the business, the team, the figureheads within the business, any news, etc. All that preparation can really contribute to making you feel as though, whatever question they throw at you, you can answer that question, no problem at all.